Well, welcome to this episode. We are in a new formation here. We have Kelsey from our Cropster team joining as per for this season for this series. Of course, it's me, Norbert, is here, and we have our wonderful guest, and we have Matt Brown here from Nevada, California, Nevada, and he will introduce himself a little bit. Matt, how's it going today?
Very well, thanks, Norbert. How are you?
Excellent. So, first question right away. Where are you from? I hear you're not from Nevada.
No, definitely not. I grew up in the northern beaches of Sydney, Australia. I was born in Torrance, California, but I was only there for 2 months before my parents moved back to Australia. So yeah.
A world traveler. Amazing. So, a little bit of background. You want to fill us in a little bit about your story? How did you get into coffee? And then maybe we'll develop it until we arrive here and talk what's on the plate today.
Yeah, no problems at all. So yeah, started in coffee in 2002. Straight after high school. So I started working for a specialty coffee company that was opposite my high school. Kind of didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, and just kind of fell into it. That particular coffee roaster, I didn't realize at the time, was established by someone who was on the board of the Specialty Coffee Association.
Mm-hmm.
And they, I believe, were the first specialty coffee training institute in Sydney, Australia. So it was called Danes Gourmet Coffee, and they had the Danes Gourmet Coffee Institute. Yeah, so worked there for 5 years. Did everything from manage their cafe to started to do some technician work for them, then ended up running their education program by the end of it. And yeah, that was a fantastic start into coffee.
I think that's a very relatable story for many people, especially here in the US. It's kind of a high school job, and in your case, it really developed into a career. So I think you started at the right company, who then led you in. What do you remember? Was there a moment where you felt like, oh, I wanna stick around, I want to be here, to make it more of a choice?
Yeah, definitely. There was a kind of few moments throughout the career that definitely kind of reinforced that as well. So the first one was probably at Danes, they hosted a national barista competition as well. So in conjunction with the Specialty Coffee Association, so the national competition, there was a one that was run by Danes also, which was the same format, same rules, same judges. But it was a monetary prize. So I think it was like 10,000 Australian dollars to win. So it wasn't insignificant. Cool. Yeah. Nice. So getting involved in that and meeting all the community for that was interesting. So working on projects there, we basically wanted to change the rules. We weren't happy with the standards at the time for espresso and things like that. It wasn't really conducive to the Australian coffee culture. We were making coffee in a very different way to those standards around that time. So we got the opportunity to write our own rules. And working on that with industry was great fun. That's when I kind of realized how underdeveloped the coffee industry was, especially in technology. So I worked with my dad to create a device that tapped into espresso machine flow meters to give the competitors a graph of their espresso extractions. So that was about 2006, 2007. So that kind of led me down the path of the technology and realizing that there was that type of career path in coffee. I think that was the first defining moment. I thought, okay, this is definitely the industry for me. I can really get my kind of head and mind in here and be engaged with this.
Yeah. It's fascinating. It's quite complex when you look at it. Supply chain is complex. The product itself, the coffee bean, right? It's one of the most complex chemical compounds you can kind of hold in your hand. And then there's so many aspects to it. And so I love your, like, what you said. You linked into or tapped into the technology part of it. Well, how did that change, or what do you take from that when you showed those graphs to your staff or to the people around you?
Yeah, it was really interesting. So the competitors at the time just were just like they were blown away, but also it wasn't really understood. So everyone's like, "Wow, that's really cool," and that was the end of the conversation.
Hmm.
There were a few people that wanted to buy the device, and my dad did make, I don't know, a dozen of them, and they're just kind of sitting at home doing nothing.
Mm,
But what it showed when we started to play around with them a little bit, just to see what was going on, is you could see the flow rate of the water through the puck because it's
mhm,
measuring the water before it enters the coffee. So you could change how you dose, how you compact, and you could see changes throughout the extraction. You could drop your pump pressure and uh, get the surprised result of reducing the flow rate but increasing or speeding up your extraction time. That was really kind of fun to see as well. But then, yeah, we didn't really do anything with it. It was at a time in my life where I was kind of transitioning out of that company, and I spent maybe 2 or 3 years just doing barista work before I started working at another big company again.
Did
Yeah.
you did you all use it for training for the competition, or was it a way to kind of use during the competition and see how the different competitors were lining up against each other?
Yeah, so one of the marks is how consistent you are in terms of your extraction. And so if you're just pushing a button and then stopping the extraction manually, you don't really know how consistent you are. And we weren't using scales back then. There weren't any technologies where you had scales in the drip trays like the Lamazocos or the Nova Simonellis.
Yeah.
Um, so we could see, so what we'd figured out by tapping into the flow meter is that with this particular machine, with this particular flow meter, every electrical pulse that it created or the signal that it sent was about 4 mils of water.
mhm,
So that's how we could graph it. And yeah, so we could see, well, then we'll determine, well, what is consistency? Like, what do we have to put in our rules to say, how does the competitor get this mark for consistency? And so, yeah, I can't remember what the plus or minus was from the target to give them the consistency mark. But yeah, it really showed how inconsistent brewing manually is and the
Mm.
importance of using volumetric systems or scales and drip trays to produce that consistency. Because yeah, if you're in a lab type setting, sure, you can stop it on a scale fairly accurately. But if you're trying to engage with customers
mhm,
while you're making 100 drinks an hour, then that consistency on manual machines just isn't really there. So it definitely gave that insight.
mhm. Did
Oh,
it
and at the
also
same time, oh, sorry to, can
no,
I?
that's good.
Yeah.
Mhm,
For some reason, the specialty coffee industry at that time, 2006, 2007, they moved away from volumetric espresso machines and went to manual machines. This is when the Synesso Syncra came out, and the paddle on the Lamazocco came out. It only lasted about 2 or 3 years. Then everyone went back to volumetrics. I
mhm.
think the Australians could see that it wasn't producing the consistency that they wanted, which is
Yeah,
totally different to the market over in the US.
yeah. There's always trends and things, but I really like to look at it from a more data informed perspective.
Yeah.
Right, what is the real outcome? I think there's a place for design and for beauty and for making things in like a certain approachable way. So that's not what I'm saying here, that
Mm.
everything needs to be just data and raw, but taking decisions or looking at what is really happening. So what I hear from you is you introduced a system, you were measuring, and then you revised the competition guidelines or rules. Where do we stand now? Are you still connected to that scene?
Not really, not in the competition scene.
Mhm,
Yeah, I moved out of it then. Yeah, didn't really get much involved. I know the SCA rules changed as well for their competitions.
mhm.
They're much better now. But yeah, I wouldn't know what the rules of the competitions are anymore. I probably haven't looked at it for at least 10 years.
Yeah. No, they change quite frequently. So that's and I think that's also a good thing, as it's a fairly young industry in general. Pushing the boundaries really only started, I don't know, 30 years ago, maybe 40. I mean, that's, it all depends where you start counting.
Yeah,
But a lot really has happened in the last 10 years when
very
you
much.
when you look at it, and every bits and pieces of information, every analysis helps us to get a little bit better. And what I feel is good is we have more people be open to science now and to
Yes.
that type of work. Mhm.
Yeah, very much. I think it's abundant right now. I love it.
Yeah, very exciting, Matt. So you were part of that push, I would say.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I started in Australia, and now you're here, and I would like to hear a little bit from you. What's the Australian coffee scene like, and what is the US coffee scene like, as from your perspective?
Yeah, definitely. So I moved to California in April 2019. So my view of Australian coffee is still from back in 2019. I went
Mhm.
back last October for the first time since then, but it's really hard to determine how it's evolved. They're
Mhm.
still recovering from a lot of the COVID. There's definitely not a lot of people out and about compared to when I was there.
Mhm.
But yeah, the Australian coffee scene is interesting. So around about that time I was saying before, kind of 2007, 2008, the roasting style changed. So the Australian coffee industry was built on the Greeks and Italians. So there was a perception that the Italian coffee was fantastic. And it is in its own right for its style. But Australia seemed to start to, once the specialty wave kind of came in around 2007, 2008, we adopted the Nordic style, very light roast of specialty coffee. So this is with the Seven Seeds, Mecca Coffee, people like that really pushed this change. And at the same time, about 2008, with the great financial crisis, with that style change in coffee came a lot better food in the cafe. So the fine dining industry was hugely affected. So the chefs from the fine dining industry were out of jobs, and they came into the cafes. So it was around about that time you started to see like $30 breakfasts, and the brunch scene in Australia really took off. So hand in hand with the beautiful food came this beautiful single origin Nordic style espresso, which took a while for consumers to adjust to, but it flourished. So you see that a lot in specialty cafes in Australia. Lots of single origin options, but it still is dominant espresso focus. The drip coffee brewers you see in Australia are tiny. Like the Breville Precision Brewer is very common on the bar in Australia for a drip coffee offering.
Mhm. Mhm.
So yeah, coming to the US, the first thing I noticed was that there was no automation. So there was a lot of manual espresso machines. There wasn't a lot of this is San Francisco Bay Area that was my American reality, I guess. Yeah, the roasters were very well developed. Lots of really good roasters in San Francisco. The quality of product coming out was fantastic, but just the barista execution, the equipment execution, the service models were just really underdeveloped. Lots of interesting systems, 16-ounce coffees, which I wasn't familiar with, and lots of sugar,
We
lots and
like it
lots and
big.
lots of flavored drinks. Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, really, really interesting. Whereas the specialty moved towards precision size cups for to go. So it's very common to get a 6-ounce cafe latte cappuccino in Australia, true to size 6-ounce, and then have the next size up being 12, so exactly double the size. So you can do a single shot and then a double shot for your 12-ounce and get the same sort of flavor profile for each beverage. That doesn't really happen over here. Those cups are available, but I don't know how the consumers would adjust to that. Our marketing campaign in Australia was more flavor, less milk. And that seemed to work.
I guess it's hard to order a half small if you start with the small on the 12 ounce, then everything below feels tiny and kind of unnecessary.
Yeah. Yeah. So
On the
yeah,
automation part, that's well interesting. So Australia, you feel is more automized on the in the coffee scene. Why do you think is that?
I'd like to think it was had to do a little bit with the company I worked for, 7 Miles Coffee Roasters, for 8 years as the education manager. We launched a lot of this. We ran a lot of public education, and one of the events that we ran was called Generation Automation, where we introduced the Eversys and the Uber Milk Steamer and all these types of technologies, and really showed with videos how it could speed up service. You're reducing labor, you're increasing consistency, and we wrote review after review after review of how this could help the cafe industry. Also, a lot of the wholesale coffee roasters in Australia, they own the cafe's equipment. It's very common to have free on loan equipment in Australia. So 7 Miles Coffee Roasters, we were buying hundreds of espresso machines a year from Unique, from La Marzocco, and we would invest in that technology. So for us, it was unbeknownst to the skill of the barista, what is going to produce the most consistent product. Let's give them something to succeed on, so then we're going to work on the training to make the dial-in process as good as it can be. And it doesn't matter if you're buying cheap coffee or expensive coffee. Like, let's just give them the right equipment. So we would give them puck press, we would give them the automated milk steamers. So long as we knew the volume and we knew what the return on investment was, then we could invest in the right technology for the volume that they were doing. And that just kind of trickled out through the industry. You'll go into a 7-Eleven and you'll see a puck press and an espresso machine. It's very, very common. Especially the Uber milks, which aren't over in the US yet. They don't have the NSF certifications. Whereas you just push, I want 12 ounces of perfectly textured milk, and it just dispenses it in the pitcher. I don't know why it hasn't taken off over here. A lot of the technology, a lot of it is still not NSF certified. So it's in kind of Europe and Australia first before it comes to the US, is what I'm learning. The most automated thing that we have at Coffee Bar is the Wally Milks. And we've got puck press in stores as well. So that was something since I've come on board that we've started to do. So I think it will. I just think it's just not as prolific just yet.
Yeah,
I think it's inevitable.
It's quite interesting when you look at it because a lot of specialty coffee trends really started around in the US. So the birthplace, I would say, of third wave coffee is here, and then so automation comes through another channel. And I mean, it might be economies which play into that, financing which plays into that. I really, my head went immediately. It's like, yeah, if you can, that's part of why we do Cropster Cafe, right? The coffee roasters put so much effort in, the producers put so much effort in, everything goes right until that moment where the coffee is roasted. And after that, you have no control anymore. So that reflects on a roaster's brand, especially if it's publicly facing in a coffee shop. So it's like, I'm serving 7 Seeds coffee, and it's like, you want to make sure that's well represented.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
My hunch too is like the values are different. So like in Europe and maybe Australia, there is this whole idea of hospitality as a career, and you get a lot of training around that. Versus in the US, it's kind of something you do while you're in high school, and it's hard to make a career out of that. So your value is the craftsmanship of building a good cup of coffee or pouring a good cup of coffee, versus with abroad, you're kind of like, I'm focusing on the customer and that hospitality piece, where I think automation would help with that.
Oh, absolutely. And that's what we showed in the videos. The main difference between, we did a side-by-side video, we conjoined it, and there was the same barista making the coffee manually, dosing manually, tamping manually, steaming manually, while trying to have a conversation with a customer, and their backs to them most of the time. Whereas with the automation, you can completely engage with the consumer, and it's faster. And it takes away repetitive stress as well. Like some of the cafes that I used to work in, we would do 1,000 espressos before midday. And it really takes a toll on your body, just standing up properly and tamping and literally just taking the milk out of the fridge. It's a huge amount of repetitive strain. So reducing all this is super important.
Exactly. Yeah. So you've kind of seen what it's like to work for a small, medium-sized roaster and then a very large roaster. And in your experience, what were the differences that you noticed working in both of those companies?
Yeah, definitely. So 7 Miles at the time was roasting about 20 tons of coffee a week, shipping it out to 800 customers throughout Australia. So whenever we wanted to make a change or an investment, there was kind of a small army behind you to do it. It was really good. So working for the smaller people, it's like you have these ideas, you know what works, but you've just got to be creative with how you can create that community, create that perception, work with manufacturers when you don't get the same sort of volume discounts, and still be competitive in a wholesale space. It's been challenging, but keeps the creative juices flowing in your brain, that's for sure.
Yeah, scale makes everything a little bit different. It's a huge opportunity, but also you gotta make sure that you know what you're rolling out, because you're suddenly training or retooling 800 outlets, right?
Yes.
And that comes at cost, but also implications if it doesn't work. So
Definitely.
I think the playground sometimes is a little bit nicer on a smaller scale, because you can pivot a little bit quicker.
Communication is definitely easier in a smaller company. That's for sure.
So we touched quite a bit on like internal training, or a little bit on the like barista trainings, making sure the coffee is prepared in a good way. Automation plays into that to a certain extent. And before we switch over to maybe external like trainings, I wanted to ask one last thing, and that's more about technology versus craft, because it always comes up. I feel it's not unimportant. I feel humans are beautiful. I just saw the presentation of the new Apple device. It's like a visual, an AR, augmented reality thing. And I my first thought, almost a little bit uneasy. It's like, will this connect us even more, right? But technologically fascinating, and so my technology heart is like, oh my god, I want this. My social heart is like, this is weird. How will we interact even more virtually? And it's like, I crave the coffee house, right? I want to talk to people. I want to sit with people.
Exactly.
Where do you see that? Like, how far can technology go without taking that human element and the approachability away? Or what's in general, what's your take on it? I don't know.
Yeah, definitely. I think that the technology, so long as it's assisting that, so long as it's enabling you to be more interactive with the customer experience, because as you say, the cafes are that hub. It's used much more as an office in the US than it is in Australia. People just sit on their laptops and it's their home away from home and things like that. So I think it's really important to keep that space, keep engagement with the person making your drinks, just being hospitable. So if it's helping you do that by you're not having to worry so much about the quality of the product because the machine's doing it for you, then I'm all for it. You've still got to understand how the technology works though, so to get the most out of it. So there's the education piece as well. I love the Eversys machines. I love that they can dial themselves into your recipes, but you still need to know the underlying theory of being able to dial in a coffee to get the best out of it. So I don't think the technology is ever going to take away from tasting and adjusting. I don't think there's any technology faster than the human senses. And even though we're very different from human to human on how we sense things, I think having that creativity of a barista creating the best balance of flavors for them for the day, I think is fairly important. It should vary, nature varies, so why shouldn't the things that we're crafting slightly vary as well, so long as they're all good, but they're just different interpretations of good? I think that's okay. Yeah, I think that's how it plays in. It's just like reduce stress on your body, increase consistency, and then really let technology lift the that hospitality experience. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah, I wonder if the design of cafes would change, if that's by including technology. When I lived in Russia, there was this concept of the anti-cafe. You paid for time versus the cups of coffee, but there was a base rate for each hour that you spent, assuming you would drink 1 or 2 cups of coffee.
That's brilliant. Yeah, the company I work for now, Coffee Bar, I think some locations definitely should implement that.
I thought it's quite challenging. I mean, I see cafes over there in around UC Davis, right? The student, and anywhere there's a lot of students. Oh, they just sit there for hours and do their work, and I think it's great to have those community spaces. Business-wise, I think it can be quite a stretch. And I talked to some of those owners, and basically what they told me is, well, we don't make our money on the people sitting here. We make the money on the takeouts, more than anything. But we are part of a community, and we want to be, so we provide space for that community. And I would almost say it's in this case it's probably more a marketing expense. So that's kind of where it should go. But from a purely economic point of view, I think the Russian model makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, it's finding that balance, because cafes are really a huge part of the community, and you don't want to just kick people out, because cafes require turnover and volume to actually be successful. So yeah, just finding that balance. We're kind of facing an interesting shift at the moment with so we're in San Mateo County, so Redwood City and Menlo Park, and also Truckee. They're enforcing different recycling and composting laws, and trying to push more of the reusables, which is very well built out in Australia. Everyone brings their own kind of mug and cup in Australia, where it's kind of a very foreign thing over here. And increasing the infrastructure to be able to handle a lot more of that, increase staffing, dealing with people bringing in dirty cups and things like that, and how that's going to affect workflow and efficiency. It's going to be interesting. So yeah,
how's that handled? Since I want to tap into that a little bit, because I know in Australia it's more a thing. I know some cafes over here do it. How do you handle dirty cups? Is it a requirement that you wash every cup before you actually use it?
So yeah, we're trying to think of different ways to do it, because we've only just launched one in the Bay Area. So we're using a cup swap program called Okapi. So that was we got a government grant for that, so I didn't have to pay for any of the cups up front. I've got one here. It's beautiful stainless steel things, different sizes, and they've got collection stations. So you just drop off your dirty cup as a consumer, and we give you a fresh cup, which is great. So that system will work. But in the town of Truckee, they're moving that to reusable food containers as well for your meals. And that's going to be interesting. That's what sort of storage space do we need for that? Yeah, people are going to bring them back. I don't think there's a collection station for that, but we're only in the beginnings of that kind of discovery of what we need to do. So the cups are easy. We might have to, if it becomes bad, we're talking about adding an upcharge for washing. Because what the town of Truckee have kind of realized is giving people discounts won't change behavior, but adding an upcharge or a surcharge is more likely to. So as of 1st of January, every to-go packaging is going to incur an extra 25 cents.
Mm-hmm. And if you have your own, you don't. That's excellent. I love it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Very
I
cool.
would say I'm one of those. I definitely bring my grocery bags instead of paying 10 cents for them now.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that was a huge shift actually, and was such a needed one. And after just a month or two, it doesn't matter once you're used to. It was so weird when I moved here from Austria. It was totally normal that I brought my bag over there. There's no plastic bags at grocery stores in Europe in general, or when I grew up at least. And coming over here, that was like bizarre almost. It's like, why are you wasting so much plastic?
I know,
and then became part of this society.
Yeah.
And now I'm back to what I used to do.
Yeah.
Totally easy.
I definitely agree with that. I got really bad when I moved over here. Just went back into old habits of just not bringing my bags, and then now that it's kind of on my plate to do a lot of the sustainability stuff for Coffee Bar, it's bringing my cup everywhere again, getting my bags for the groceries. It's just consumer behavior, and if you're in a routine, it's not hard.
I think that's the perfect segue actually into that part I wanted to tap on or touch on, and that's the external education. So we're already talking about consumer education in a certain sense. Now I would like to switch that deeper into the coffee education, into what is the status quo? What do people need? And I think that the question really comes also from you're operating in an area which is not considered the specialty coffee headquarters of the world. So what's the situation? What's your approach?
Yeah, definitely. So there's no barista education really in Reno, Nevada. There's definitely a need for it though. So do you mind if I just give a bit of a backstory of Coffee Bar?
Cool. Yes, please.
So I started at Coffee Bar at the beginning of the lockdowns. So I was working for Equator Coffees in the Bay Area, and their wholesale department closed down because most of their business is roasting for the tech offices. And of course, no one was at the tech offices. So I moved to Reno. I approached Coffee Bar, who my wife is the training manager for. And the owner's name is Greg Buckheister. And I just said, hey, Greg, do you want to see if we can diversify some income streams? Do you want me to start a wholesale program for you? And he's like, yeah, I don't know if my cafes are going to be open for the next few months, so let's give it a shot. So Coffee Bar just has eight cafes from the Bay Area up to Reno, Nevada. And education is a big piece of growing that program, the external sales for Coffee Bar. So introducing new products, introducing kind of service technicians, equipment, et cetera, but you've got to build the training infrastructure as well, because you want people to represent your brand very well. And what we're faced with in Reno at the moment, and a lot of places around the world, is a challenge to get staff in cafes and then retain staff in cafes. And Becky's just the education manager. My wife is just spending her time just training people to a base level, and then they leave. And so there's just a lot of time and effort and money going into training. So we need to kind of start an external program and start working with the schools and universities in Reno to get coffee into the hospitality curriculums as soon as possible. If you introduce the subconscious of coffee into people going out, having a gap year and starting to work in cafes, then the training's a lot easier and you can build on that. We're not speaking a foreign language as soon as they walk into the door. So it's not just that as well. Like, you've got to start at the base, but then you need to also work on the consumer education. So the specialty roasters in Reno, there's kind of like 4 or 5 specialty coffee roasters, and they're all doing a fine job, but there's no incentive to really get better, to create a community, to work together. And so we really need to do that to create the community in Reno as well. So collaborate with the local roasters, put on competitions and not just latte art throwdowns, put on cupping championships, put on coffee and good spirits types championships, build that collaboration and community. So if people do want a career in coffee, then it's already there. So that should help sustain people in the cafes for longer because there's actually engagement. And then consumer education as well. So opening those classes up to the public, doing public cuppings at the roastery, doing basic espresso classes, pour over classes, so people can taste the difference between coffees. A lot of the value or realization of quality comes by side-by-side tastings, just to know what coffee can taste like and things like that. So we're actively working on that infrastructure at the moment. So hopefully within the next 6 months, we'll start to roll out the public education for Reno and build that community, just build value in coffee so that the consumers will pay more for it. So it'll hopefully trickle down the supply chain. Yeah, that's always the goal.
That's a massive undertaking. So it's all those elements, right? And whenever it goes into the public, suddenly you're one against thousands.
Yeah.
What is your first step on that? So I also think a little bit about our listeners, because I think it's a topic in many areas.
Yeah.
Where would you say, well, not everybody has a Matt Brown available at the moment. What is yours? Like, start with this or try this, and that might already move the needle a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. I think the first two things you can do is to open the roastery. If you've got a roastery, open it up to public cuppings. Welcome people behind the scenes to get a little bit of insight into the process. If you don't have a roastery, you can do tastings in your cafes as well. Just engage consumers, and then throw a competition here and there. It'd start off with the latte art throwdowns. Yeah, they're fairly cheap to put on. They don't have to be free. A lot of companies do it for free. Just do a $5 buy-in and then winner takes all type thing. It's a really good engagement. And that's probably where I'd start. Yeah.
The most outrageous competitions I've seen so far were the AeroPress and also the ones actually put on in Australia.
Yes.
The wildest parties and really good fun.
I know, right? Yeah. The Australian coffee scene is just a party. It's amazing.
Yes, that's why we love it so much. Yeah, that's very cool. That's super insightful. And as I said, I think the challenge is on to bring that education to the community, and the returns, I think, are definitely then there because you recruit baristas from the community, have hopefully longer term effects within your own staff, but also within your customer base. And what always is true is people talk to people. I realized that wherever I go, I just love to talk about my work, and it's not the technical, it's not the how to run a company part. That's usually not of interest.
Yeah.
But it's like, where's the coffee coming from? How do you prepare it? Where do I get good stuff? Why is it better? Why is it better at your house and not so good at mine? I think those are simple things to address and a lot of fun to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, demystifying that's really important, especially for the home user, because that's such a common question. Like, how can I make coffee as good as you? Why do I take your beans home and it doesn't taste as good? Yeah, it's a super common question. It's like, yeah, we have $10,000 worth of equipment right here producing this recipe.
But you also do something extremely approachable. You have a product which doesn't require so much work and not so much education.
Yeah.
And that would be the instant.
Yeah, the instant coffee for sure. That just here.
Yes. Yeah, the trailhead. So can you talk a little bit about that? First of all, how do you get to that? But also, why is it important in your market?
Oh, absolutely. So part of building out the wholesale program for Coffee Bar was to introduce a few new products. So for their cafes, they were roasting kind of an espresso blend, and then anything kind of medium to light roast was single origins. So they didn't have a medium roast blend. So for wholesale consumers that didn't want seasonality or as much seasonality, then yeah, we needed to create that. So Trailhead's also a whole bean coffee that we wholesale. And then for our market, so we're in the high Sierra Nevadas and surrounded by like Lake Tahoe's an hour drive away, Truckee half an hour drive away, Plumas is not that far as well. So camping, hiking, cycling, huge kind of outdoor community here. So yeah, we wanted a single serve product so you can have an amazing coffee in while you're camping. You don't have to bring your pour over kit, your scales, your hand grinder, and all that kind of stuff. You can still have a delicious coffee. And when we were looking into what type of single serve that we wanted to do, most of the manufacturers that wanted to create that tea bag or that pour over kit, minimum orders are like 15,000 units. And yeah, they're nitrogen flushed pouches, but they're pre-ground coffee, and the quality there's a bigger deterioration in flavor over a period of time compared to a freeze-dried product like instant. So since we wanted to try the market, we assumed it would work, but we weren't too sure. We went with an instant coffee. So our first run was made by Voila up in Bend, Oregon, but unfortunately their business closed down. I think they're affiliated, or they might have started in New Zealand from memory. But now they're called New Ground Coffee in New Zealand. So when we couldn't get from them anymore, we went to New Ground Coffee in New Zealand for this next batch. And yeah, fantastic product.
That's amazing. It just shows me that you really have to be creative, but really bring a good solution to your market. Instant is maybe not the next best choice for San Francisco or for certain markets where your coffee house is on each corner and you have constant supply. But for an outdoor market, as you have that, it's pretty cool. And
very much.
Also, it's not. I mean, it's not just instant coffee. I think that's important point to make here. You also diversify it. This is specialty instant.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. It's not cheap, and because it's because of the amount of effort that goes into it. So I always like to tell consumers, here's your batch brew here. Just imagine we took that batch brew and dehydrated all the liquid out of it after we've brewed it, and then we turned it into a powder for you. So there's all that extra energy and effort into that. So that's why it costs the same as if you're walking into a coffee bar and getting a drip coffee. Because there is all that. And another thing,
and you're using good beans, right? It's not
absolutely.
the whatever is left after the harvest and didn't sell.
No, very much not. So the first round with Voila, we got to send our Trailhead blend to them to get turned into instant coffee. Whereas in New Zealand, that wasn't gonna work, sending all the coffee to New Zealand. So we sent them a product. They product matched it for us. It was roasted, so the beans were from Flight Coffee, and roasted by Flight Coffee in New Zealand, pretty well respected specialty roaster over there. And then New Ground turned that into instant for us. And the development process was really interesting because we got to taste 5 different single origins as raw single origins, just as pour overs, and then what it translated into instant coffee. And any of like the high-end Ethiopians, anything with really kind of floral notes, that just got completely destroyed in the freeze drying process. So what we decided to do was use a medium roast that really emphasized sweetness. So this is just like a really nice, clean, sweet, not super complex coffee that if you want to add cream and sugar, you can. And yeah, it's what you need while you're camping and nothing more. And then for us, the important thing with this new brand was to have a little bit of social responsibility with it as well. And this is what Equator Coffee's kind of taught me working there, is it's really easy to donate with products. So we partnered with the National Forest Foundations. So 50 cents of every box sold goes to local projects in Truckee and Reno. The first one was the Big Jack East project in Truckee, which was their development to create sustainable burning areas around expensive infrastructure. So how they kind of cleared land, created stuff on the ground, but also protected habitats for animals, and creating hiking paths as well throughout those environments. So if a forest fire does come through, it'll protect the electrical infrastructure, the people's houses and things like that, and just burn specific regions, because the forests do need to burn to be sustainable. So yeah, we've been partnering with them for the last kind of 2.5 years, 3 years. And yeah, as this brand grows, we donate more and more to the national forests, which is great.
Amazing.
Yeah,
we all should have a pack of that for sure.
Yeah.
I know, it would make me feel a lot better if I'm drinking the coffee that's also keeping the hiking path, you know, clean for me. So I don't have to worry about getting burned while I hike. A constant worry of mine in the summer in California. That's
cool.
good. So it sounds
Awesome.
like,
yeah.
Oh, I was
Kelsey,
going to say, it sounds like
please.
you're very experimental with different processes, and really knowledgeable about different brew tools. What kind of tools are you most excited about these days, or kind of watching?
Ooh, that's a good question. What am I getting into at the moment? I would love to be able to take the instant coffee manufacturing in-house. I bought a $300 freeze drying book to learn the process. But yeah, we don't have the investment to buy that equipment right now. So I'd love to go down that path. I want to get more automated milk systems into the US. So there's the milk dispensers in Australia called by 6 Simple Machines, called the juggler systems, and they use big 10-liter bladders of milk in fridges. And I just want to reduce packaging in general. And so the milk suppliers over here and the alternative milk suppliers, you've got to prove to them that there's a supply chain for this before they're going to get on board to changing their manufacturing. So yeah, I'd love to get more automated milk systems, especially the alternate milks. They just come in 32-ounce packs, and you're constantly just opening and throwing out all this packaging. I'd love for that automated dispensing system to be more prolific over here. So yeah, I'd love
How
to
would
look
that
into
exactly work, Matt? How does it look like? I don't have that in clear. What's involved?
sure.
Does it come in big packs of plastic,
So
or
yeah,
is
it
it?
comes in a 10-liter kind of soft plastic bladder, with a little valve at the end. So imagine you've got your bus bin in the cafe.
Yeah.
It's the bladder will sit in that bus bin basically, and it just slides in and connects to the tap system in the fridge. Yeah, super easy. And you just, again, not constantly opening milk bottles or things all the time. So again, less RSI.
What about a returnable keg system?
Yeah, returnable keg systems, those type of swap programs. Like we do that for our coffee for our stores. We just use buckets in bulk, and we're just constantly refreshing those buckets. So we don't use a lot of the packaging for our current locations, and I'm definitely looking into more of that. So I'm working with a manufacturer in Reno at the moment, to see if we can get 10-gallon paint tins, food safe paint tins with one-way valves integrated into them. So we can have a branded tin and just do a swap program for our wholesale clients as well that we deliver to. Trying to do that for the consumer as well, while also trying to respect the quality of the coffee, so not oxidizing coffee rapidly as well. Just trying to figure out those systems. So yeah, packaging I think is really important, and yeah, they're the things that I'm looking into at the moment, and of course the to-go cups. Yeah,
always pushing, always changing. I love it.
Yeah.
Cool. I think with that, we have come really a long way in our conversation today. And I would say it's time to wrap it up.
Cool.
I really appreciate all your insights. Thank you so much for your time, for bringing all those concepts, being so open with us.
Cool.
we, our listeners, everybody appreciates that. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks for
Yeah.
inviting me on. Appreciate it.
Cool.
Of course.
Amazing.
Thanks for joining us.
Mhm.